work on this computer. So, well, good afternoon, everyone. We're at 12:01, so I'm going to get this ball rolling. I'm excited to introduce Jerome Le Caroux today. He is our guest speaker. He is talking to us from France, and he's going to be talking about his personal educational journey and how he's worked all over the world and how you can too. So Jerome, thank you so much for joining us today. Really grateful. I'm going to just turn it over to you.
Thank you, Stacy, for having me and extending the invitation. I'm super excited to be here as well, and hopefully sharing some insightful elements of my journey, which hopefully would be resonating with some of you or inspiring. I'd like to share a few slides just to kind of support this conversation, and let's make it interactive. So if you have any questions, really just feel free to interrupt me. Feel free to use the chat as well. We're a small group, so let's make it interactive. Okay.
Is the share working? Oh, there we go. Got it.
It's not there. Is it? It's here. Yeah, after a year of Zoom, let me see. Up. Okay, I think it's there. Can you see it now? No.
Not yet.
Yeah. Okay.
There we go. Yes.
Great. So the title we gave to this conversation is From Rural Brittany, where I am right now, and where I was born and raised, to Utah, where I studied abroad, and to Asia, where I spent the last 15 years or 16 years. And so from rural Brittany to Utah to Asia, an entrepreneurial journey in international education. So I am the founder and director of an organization called Next Step, which provides experiential learning and internships in Asia since 2008 for higher ed institutions. So I'd like to start by putting a few elements here in perspective. As I said, my name is Jerome Le Caroux. I have lived 14,325 days on this planet. Something that I remind myself of every day is that time is ticking away. Energy is all we have. And I'd like to share a bit of where I invested what I have, which is my energy. So I'd like to start by, you may wonder what these two elements stand for. There's one which is on the left, a cowboy boot, and on the right, it's a Chinese envelope. So we can call that a red packet as well, a red pocket that we usually give for Chinese New Year, and there's kind of a symbol of luck, wishing well to someone during that festival. And to me, these elements are important because when I was a child, I grew up around these two elements. I had a relative who studied in the US, and when I was a child, bought a cowboy boot from Texas because he was studying in Texas. So I grew up in a very small town in rural Brittany, and I had this boot near me during my childhood, and from probably 5-6 years of age until probably 10-12 years old, I had this red pocket on my bedside table, which was kind of mysterious in some way, because again, I'm in rural Brittany, very small town, and I had this red pocket near me, and I remember looking at it, going to bed or looking at it in the morning, not really knowing what this was, but it was there. And that was given by a family friend to my parents many years ago. So I like these two elements because for me, they are somehow seeds of inspiration when you grow up in a very rural area, and somehow they symbolize a possibility. So as I said, I grew up in a very small town, 3,000 inhabitants is the actual picture, in Brittany. I don't know if you're familiar with this region. It's in the northwest of France. We have our own flag, very strong culture, but I grew up around farmland. So growing up in this area kind of, I would say, I wouldn't say limit, but my future prospects were pretty limited by the environment. So I could probably work in the fields or, work in services area near my town, but nowhere would I probably ever imagine that I would, um, you know, um, live overseas for so many years, if I look backward. So that's to set up, I would say, the context of where I grew up. And my first experience going overseas was, for an extended period of time, was in the US. And if you remember the cowboy boot that I mentioned, again, I think I've carried that seed in me. And going through high school and going through my 2 years of undergrad in France, I always had this vision or this dream to go study in the US. To me, that was a must that I needed to achieve, because again, I think I had carried this seed in me for these years. And I studied in Utah State through ISEP. Very grateful to this organization that organized this program. So I was part of it. My home university in France was part of the ISEP program, and I was one of the 5 students that were selected to go spend a year overseas in the US. And I was at Utah State University, which is in Logan, Utah. But what made that experience really, I would say, unexpected was that I was living in the sort of global village. Actually, that's how they call it at Utah State. They have this dorm called San Juan Hall. And in this hall, you had really a global village of 16 nationalities living together. So my roommates were, from Taiwan, from Korea, from Spain, from Peru, and the entire 4th floor of that building was habited by people from all over the world. So to me, it was actually an amazing experience because within the building, I had a good sample of different regions of the world, and we lived together for a year. So obviously, we immersed in the American culture, but we had that also multicultural lens, and that really opened my eyes to the ways of a broader world. So I put on the left top corner, I'm a French student, because that's where living in that environment, people refer to you as the French student. Yeah, so being back home in Brittany, obviously there's no such thing as being French, not French. I'm living home, so it is what it is. Now being in that environment, I was the French student. Actually, there was 2 French students on campus. So it's pretty unique, I would say. But you start seeing things from a different perspective, and that was really, to me, one of the stepping stone or turning point that would open up future opportunities for me. So fast forward, as I finish this study abroad experience and graduate, I'm already telling myself, just don't want to go home. There's no way I'm going to go back to Brittany at this moment. I had already started learning Mandarin at university. That was one of my courses that I was taking, thanks to my, I would say, probably visionary mom, who told me at 18 that I should, if I had the opportunity, I should really learn Chinese. And that was back in 2001. And I took this course at university. I really enjoyed it. And after finishing and graduating, I was like, okay, I think I want to go and explore China. I've never been to Asia. I feel much more confident now, comfortable. I've lived in this global environment in the US, and I don't want to go back home. So my plan was actually to enroll into grad school, to do an MA in journalism. So I did all the preparation to apply for grad school, GRE, and so on. but then I had a 4-month gap. So I had my admission result. I was going to start my master in August 2006, but I had this 4-month gap, and I chose that this is the time that I will go to China and do an internship. I wanted to get some work experience under my belt for this master's degree, and I wanted to be immersed into the Chinese culture for a couple of months. So here I am in a city of 30 million inhabitants. So coming from a city of 3,000 inhabitants, it's a pretty big jump. And it was really a roller coaster ride for me. I arrived there, I had really severe culture shock. It was winter in Shanghai, and the city didn't look like it, what it looked like, these past few years. It was in full development, there's cranes everywhere. And I was blew away by the environment I was in, pretty intimidated by the size of the city, and completely lost, I would say. But eventually over the course of my internship, I started to immerse myself into the life there. And from being a stranger or foreigner, I started to kind of blend it in by going out with my colleague after work to some events, taking part of some activities. I was interning for a magazine actually called Shanghai Talk, and I was given some feature to write, and I started to meet a lot of people in Shanghai, and really actually started to enjoy it. And here we are. There's another pretty significant turning point for me. Through my internship, I was asked to interview a business person in Shanghai who had built several food and beverage concept, hospitality concept, and then interview him, write a feature. And at the end of that interview, we kept in touch. And then at the end of my internship, he asked me if I wanted to stay, and if I wanted to kind of work with him in opening a new venture that he was opening. And so here I was. I had two choices: whether I would go to do my master's in the US, or I would just stay here, work with someone that I've that I barely know, but being in a city where I knew there was so many opportunities, and a lot of things could be unlocked in terms of my own potential, my skills development. It was almost like a mini MBA in some ways. So I decided to stay and deferred my admission for my master's degree, and I stayed there. And I worked for a year and built this venture, and I learned so much. Like, it was unbelievable. It was really hands-on. I was 23, 24. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to get a taste of business firsthand. And actually I got it. After that experience of a year, I realized that being there, let's say being in a developing market with economic growth, where the whole world would meet, it was somehow like a melting pot, could be very transformative for any youth that is still in university or graduating and are kind of searching for what they want to do, or develop skills, immerse themselves in an environment, and sort of unlock their potential. And this is where the idea of starting Next Step was seeded. I looked at my own experience, how a 4-month internship out of my comfort zone really transformed me and opened up new opportunities that I could have never imagined if I'd stayed in where I grew up. And so Next Step was born like this. We started as a platform for foreign students to come and do internships in Shanghai, and we started in 2008. And this is where the story started. And as of today, we've worked with 3,500 students from 60 different countries who are coming every year, both remotely now and also physically in different parts of Asia. We've expanded to Southeast Asia, Korea, and Japan, also India. So now students can do it both online and in person to develop skills and enhance their employability. So in 12 months, if I look at it, I went from severe culture shock to writing features to opening a business venture with someone, to starting my own company. And to be honest, when I finished my undergrad, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to do grad school because I wanted to kind of continue to study and give myself, as much as possibilities. as I could for this master's degree, but I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted to do. And if I look backward at this 12 months, it's quite amazing that so many things happen. And I think it's because I was in the place where things like this were happening. So the last part of my journey that I wanted to highlight today, it's actually where, so in the slide before, it's moving from being French to understanding that I am international in some ways, because Shanghai was so international. I was living in China, but my friends were from, so many different countries. I was working internationally. To next step, our clients are not only in the US, but in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, in Australia, in South America. So I'm really interacting constantly in an international perspective or a dimension. And I would say one of the one of the transformative part of that journey happened when I was in China, because at the age of 30, so I think I was working pretty intensively, and also realizing that I was lacking tools. I was lacking tools to be in such a vast environment. I learned by doing, but I was lacking tools, and so I suffered a pretty strong burnout when I was 30. I had a lot of stress and anxiety, mental health, physical ailments, and that was a pretty tough time. So that's what I call it. This part of my life is more like it's not a journey outward. It's really a journey inward. And the journey was to to move from burnout to being a conscious human being, and to start understanding how I could take life into my hands. And so this is where I decided to move out of China. So my team stayed there and continued the office. But personally, I think I was looking for a different dynamic, a place where there was a bit more nature, and that would fit my kind of a state at that time. And so I decided to move to Thailand in 2014. And perhaps it's a Buddhist country as well. There was spirituality infused, and to me, I think there was a need that I had at that time. And so we decided to set up an office in Bangkok for next step. But I was really this time guided by my I think decision to move from East Asia to Southeast Asia. And then as part of that journey, I decided that if I wanted to continue running my organization and still being quite young, that if I wanted to continue exploring new opportunities and growing, I needed to understand how how the mind functions, how the body functions, how the energy function, how your emotion function, because there's no way I would handle this without falling flat again. And so part of my journey was to live for a while in India. So that's another part of living internationally. I realized that India had a lot to offer for what I was looking for at that time, which was spirituality. And I decided to spend a couple months there and learn, meditation, practice a lot of yoga, and I think grew a lot as an individual. Spent some days in silence, and that was part of a very, the inner desire to grow. So that was another type of journey. You cannot measure it by miles, but it's very fruitful and very transformative part of my life. So if I look at all the dots and how I'm connecting them today, it all started really with some seeds of inspiration, as I call them. We sometimes have these seeds around us, and to me it was this cowboy boot and this this red pocket near me. I think that was really what at a very young age was always near me. I was always observing this and wondering where they come from, and I think this desire or this thirst started to grow at that time for me to go outside of the environment I was in. And if my mom hadn't planted that seed that Chinese should China would be an important country and I should learn the language, and probably I would have never ended up going to China after my study abroad in the US. And if I hadn't lived that experience of transitioning from an intern to an entrepreneur at 23, I don't think I would have had um, the the idea of setting up Next Step to help more students experience this process. And if I hadn't work hard as I did, I probably wouldn't have experienced a burnout, or if I had the necessary tools at a younger age, I wouldn't have experienced a burnout. So then by experiencing this burnout, then I kind of opened another door of opportunity, which was harnessing tools to be able to live in a conscious way and in harmony. And what's interesting is when I came back after this journey, I developed I built an event in Bangkok called Elevating Purpose for C leaders, executive, and CEO who realize also we're experiencing this type of situation when you are, when you're an entrepreneur and nobody really talks about it. Now we're talking more and more about it, but at that time, not many people were talking about it. So we opened a conversation, a dialogue on mental health when you're an executive, and by organizing that event, very interesting. What came next is I was hired by the largest executive, personal development for executive network, which is called APM. We have 8,500 CEOs in that network, and I was hired by them to nurture a group of CEOs in Bangkok, who are French. So again, by throwing myself 100% into organizing an event because I really wanted to bring this dialogue, I thought it was really necessary, then something else emerged. So another dot that was there. And after connecting with and being part of that organization and supporting these CEOs in their journey, then I had another opportunity that opened up, which was to kind of write on strategic and geopolitical topics that are happening in the region that I'm in, Southeast Asia, for a French think tank. So that's another thing I started doing 2 years ago. And that opportunity opened up because of the network I was in. So again, what I'm trying to share here is that if you're really aware of each action has one, but not only one, but several consequences of that action, and if you really involve yourself 100% with the right intention in every action, then there are so many so many amazing things that happen afterwards. And if I look at this entire spectrum of pictures and trying to connect the dots and all of them, it's really amazing that it all ties back to one word, just being aware, being conscious of the decisions that you're making, and being part of the solutions, not being part of challenges. We have so many challenges working internationally, but if we always position ourselves on the side of the solution, then somehow everything, everything flows. So that's a little bit how my journey started, how it has been going since, because I'm not done yet. Just wanted to share this. What's also important, I like to put in perspective, is that on average, it seems like a male living in a developed economy like I do live about 27,000 days. So I like to put this number in perspective and see that I've lived 14,000 and 600 plus days, and trying to look at all the things I've done and what was the meaning of all these things that I've been doing. And moving forward, looking at, there's no guarantee of this at all, but looking at it and say, okay, where do I really want to invest my time in? Because my time and energy is all we have, time and energy, and into activities that truly matters. And when I look at all of this, to me, there's one thing that come out of it is really passionate about student growth, student development. That's the part I do with Next Step. I'm passionate about executive development, executive well-being. That's the part I do with APM. And I'm also interested in international matters as well, because I've been living internationally. I'm 39, and since I'm 21, so it's been 18 years, almost half of my life. And so by connecting these dots and understanding, to me, that there's a link as well between geopolitics and what we do with Next Step, because having students being able to immerse in international context at a young age will create, dialogue and understanding and acceptance of differences, which will, I'm sure, will help us in solving the numerous challenges that we have today, and working together. So again, trying to connect all these different elements, but really asking yourself the question, what truly matters. We only have a limited amount of time, and we want to invest it into what we think matters the most. And this is it. So I've listed the website. This is my email as well. I can post in the chat. Feel free to reach out. And like this quote as well, which really symbolizes the work that we do, is that we really believe every human being is capable of a unique possibility. All start with a first step. Thank you very, very much for listening, and happy to take your questions.
Jerome, thank you so much, first of all, for sharing your personal journey, because I think it's really important for everyone to understand that it doesn't matter where you start, it's how you progress, that you can just keep building and build something. And that's what you've done. But can you tell them a little bit about some of the opportunities available through Next Step also?
Yeah, so what we do with Next Step today, we organize both remote internships and in-person internships. So those opportunities can be taken any time of the year, in different countries that we operate. So that is Japan, Korea, China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and India. So if you're interested, for example, do a 4 to 8 weeks internship during your summer, this is something we can organize. And if you're interested to do it, for example, remotely during your semester, because you may not have the time to go overseas, for example, or you would prefer to do it remotely because you have other constraints, this can also be done. We've worked with numerous institutions with that model now, where students take part-time remote internship during the semester and could be plugged in with a company in Japan, in Korea, in India, or in China, in your field of studies. It could also be in a field that you really want to explore. Let's say you're unsure, you maybe you have a certain major and you want to dive into a different one, because that's part of it, right? You want to explore different career opportunities. Then it's definitely something that we encourage and provide on a month-to-month basis.
So it sounds like you turned your own experience into a business. So I want to open it up. Does anybody have a question for Mr. Carew?
I do. Hey, thank you so much for being here. One, I've enjoyed your accent, so that has been really fun for me. But two, I really like the notion that the last slide, talking about the notion of what truly matters and looking at investing in time into what truly matters. And I think since COVID, I specifically have seen students gravitate a little bit away from education and more into, family or, more personal matters, that kind of thing. But I wonder, getting those students back into the notion of education, and especially an international education, right? We're in a global economy, and a lot of times I see more students backing away from an educational world and an open world and pulling back into family and family matters and that kind of thing. But how do you impart excitement because it's exciting to me to go to another place. I'm thinking, how can I get an internship? Don't tell, Stacy, don't tell. But how do we reinvigorate what truly matters in the notion of a sense of global ideal for students?
I think it's a lot of self-reflection too. I think sometimes we are caught in situation and we don't take the the helicopter view or the necessary distance to really put things ahead. Put things in perspective and realize what do we really want to achieve. And again, to me, I need to see I need to put things in perspective and see where I am. And to me, days are important, because this is you mentioned it, but looking at, okay, I have this limited amount of time, and what truly matters at this moment, right? And to me, this is the guiding star. So for students, again, it's hard to make a general comment because I think each of them will need to have their own source of inspiration and probably career path or vision of what they want to achieve with their life. And as you said, perhaps it could be family for now, but that doesn't mean that you should restrain to not opening up to other dimensions. So taking on, actually what we have done with some students is when you have a family, it might be hard to travel. So we have some students, for example, that we work with last term, and just to give an example, there are certain communities where it's very hard to travel, and so just taking a virtual immersive kind of internship where again it's a door that opens. Yeah, it's just a door that opens, a door of opportunity that opens for a certain number of weeks. Just immersing yourself, just involving yourself in that process, and then there are opportunity that will yield and new perspective that will emerge from the students' way of thinking. So I think before we're limited because okay, we can only travel during the summer. I know I cannot. So how do I make this happen? And I think with the technology now, we can immerse ourselves from home. And again, that could be a seed. We've had many students who had never worked internationally and that had that seed, for a couple of weeks to do it. And suddenly something else happened. It's like, wow, that was a realization that this is amazing. Now I want to travel because I want to experience it, with all my senses. I want to be there. I want to breathe, eat, and touch and see that experience. So that's why I say it's all start with a small step. Another aspect is obviously skills, skills that you developed. As you said, we're working in a global economy, and being able to navigate this. Again, if it's online, it doesn't mean it's not as good as an in-person immersion because the nature of work is changing too. We are talking right now on Zoom, and half of my team, I talk to them mostly on Zoom. So understanding, how to function in multicultural teams in a global setting is also a skill set that we should have, by when we graduate from university. So I think those are different elements. There's more an inspirational one, or, and there's one which I think is more related to skills and what sort of career you want to achieve. Because, you could be in a state in the US and still working for a company that has, team members who are from Asia, from different part of the world, and do business with these regions at some point. Sorry, that was a bit broad, but I hope that helps.
Well, my question was really large, so I appreciate your input on that. Thank you.
Stacy, I think you're muted.
Sorry, thank you for that. That's part of the fun tech side, learning to mute and unmute yourself at the appropriate times.
Yeah, exactly.
So I know that you've worked with community colleges, and that was one of the reasons that Jerome and I started talking, is because he has worked with a lot of community colleges. Can you talk a little bit about how these schools have accessed your services and some of the impacts from that for community college students?
Yeah, I mean, it all started with, I think, the COVID era, where opportunities were limited at that time, but then there was an opportunity, to immerse yourself into, a new learning modality, which the remote internships provides. So when we started speaking with the schools, they realized that incorporating starting with a pilot program when you have 5 to 10 students to sort of immerse themselves in that experience for a certain number of weeks could open them up to, as I said, the ways of a broader world in that sense, by starting with this, where cost is also play a big part in it. We know that if you want to spend 2 months overseas, it's $5,000 to $10,000 as well on the expenses. A program like this, costs between $1,000 and $2,000. It's significantly, cheaper without, without removing, I would say, what makes an international experience successful, which is again being immersed in an environment which is multicultural. So this is, I think, the angle. I think the lightness of the pilot. We're not looking for a 3-year, agreement to do this and that. Let's do a lighter version of it. Let's have students be part of that process. Let's analyze, the skills they have developed during this process, and how they come out of it. And if it's positive, let's look at how we can incorporate this as part of the curriculum as a component, a component that is part of a certain course. And that's what we have done with some schools. Actually, we started with a pilot, and now we have 100 students doing the program. It's part of the first year, curriculum. They have to do this. So yeah, it started with a small step.
And I think that's true for anybody and anything you're doing. You have to start with the baby steps and move and build. How do you see that people who participate in virtual exchange internships, how are they leveraging that for their jobs, for their future careers? How are you seeing that being used?
Well, the first thing is you can market this experience in your LinkedIn and your resume. It's not a how to say, it's, you can market it the same way. It's visible, so you can put it on your resume and your LinkedIn. You work with a company in China. Yeah, you were not there in person, but again, today the nature of work is changing. So being able to experience this firsthand, and that is the first and foremost important point. But the second is also to have, I would say, the drive and the necessary motivation to say, this is what I should be doing, because this is where the world of work is heading as well. Is multicultural, is remote, is working in teams. So if a student starts to say, well, this is where I should invest my time because this is going to be critical, then I think an employer will recognize that some students have taken the steps, to kind of train themselves. So first, it has no, I would say, trying to struggle with to find a word. I'm thinking French right now because I'm in France and I'm speaking French every day. But I would say there's no difference by saying, oh, I've done it in person or virtual. There's no difference to it in that sense, where it's still as valuable and as valid. You don't need to say, well, it's remote, it's not as important. No, it's the nature of work is changing. So it is actually important. And second is showcasing that during a critical time where we have experience, or right now out of a pandemic, having the awareness or the clarity to think that this is where it's going and I should invest my time in. And then you talk about skills. Well, the ability to work in multicultural teams, the ability to harness technology, the ability to speak, to communicate, both orally and in a written form, the ability to take initiative, the ability to be solution driven. I think all of this is experienced through this program, and I think those are skills that employers are looking for today. Those are, there's a list of 6-8 skills that employers are looking. When I look at them, I have no problem saying that the students will tick these boxes by doing the program.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, Jerome, thank you so much for taking the time to calling us from France. We really appreciate it. Hey, we were lucky we didn't catch him in Singapore. That would have been worse for him. So and I've done that. I've done that to him before. So again, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to stop the recording now. Let's see how